Okay. Is there audio coming through? I guess there is. Let me turn that on. There we go. Okay, excellent. All right. This is a netbook. It is not the fastest computer system in the universe. As you may know, okay, I'll be able to look at questions. Somebody type something and see if I can see a chat over there. Can anybody hear and see what's going on here? Okay, so there's a chat message. Okay, I suppose that's working. Okay. Well, here's a graphic novel about government censorship and people who got around it, you know, the book people. So that goes back to the 50s. And my name is Kent Hastings. I was assistant director of the Agorist Institute. One of the things we did was put out a journal called the Agorist Quarterly, and I was friends with Samuel Edward Konkin III. There's a portrait that was commissioned by Brad Lineweaver, based on a photograph I took of Sam in 2003 in Las Vegas. In this one and only issue of Agorist Quarterly so far, that was we put this together in 1994, and in 1995 it came out. And my article is called "The Information Underground Railroad: Bruce Schneier's Applied Cryptography," and I basically am reviewing this book. So the internet was taking off back then, and in even the beginnings of the World Wide Web. I don't believe Netscape was really a big deal yet. It didn't have much of an audience. I mean, 95, I guess it was coming online. Mosaic was the big browser before that, which I saw at some defense plants that I worked as a temp job. So here's a moral quandary. Do you take a temp job at a defense plant, or do you collect unemployment? You know, there's a, let's see what we got over here. Sec 3, okay, what's it? Okay, I'm going to be missing comments because I'm going to be just sort of going through my thing, and I'll try to catch up to comments later on. So in this recent news, we noticed that Egypt had their internet plugged, and this thing says Egypt ham radio beats internet outage. That came to the attention of Libyans. This post was mentioned on Twitter by TurkeyFan11, Fubu Rossi, Freetel W, and my favorite, Libyan Mad Dog, Change in Libya, and others. Change in Libya said, "In case of internet cutoff, you might find some useful tips here." So I'm going to read, I'm just going to read this because it's current. All right. The oldest radio signaling method was used to send messages between people in Egypt, according to this article at the Huffington Post. There's a link there. So this is on resilientfreedom.org. Just look for the Egypt ham radio beats internet outage thing, and you can read the thing. Quoting HuffPo, "These messages weren't coming from mobile phones or computers, but from an amateur radio sending out Morse code somewhere amidst the chaos in Egypt." And then I wrote, "Hundreds of miles range with a few watts using a wire thrown over a tree branch for an antenna can beat the government kill switch." And Alex Jones was talking about this, and he has a good list of alternative methods which are linked here, and I'm going to cover some of those in a moment. So, you know, we have anarchists and agorists and people who ham radio, doesn't that require a license? Well, you don't need to learn Morse code anymore. It does require FCC license, and they test you on theory. There's a I put on my Facebook profile a link to the question pools that are going to be asked for each class of license. There's 3 classes at the moment: technician, general, and extra class. Now, my class of license is advanced. That was an old license that's just under extra. So I'm actually studying for my extra class right now with a book that kind of reorganizes the free question pool texts that are available into a more logical structure. And so anyway, just I find it helpful. Anyway, so I'm studying that. But my advanced license and the extra class license, so the novice and extra advanced, there's novice, technician, general, advanced, and extra. Novice and advanced are kind of grandfathered in, even though you can't get one now. And advanced and extra have reciprocal licensing agreements in the European Union. So I can go overseas without much trouble and broadcast if I happen to go over there. And that's not really broadcasting. Now we get into things like communicating and transmitting and broadcasting have peculiar definitions. With ham radio, in some ways it's kind of like the oldest open source technology. Back when the computer industry was getting started, you'd go to a computer convention, people, hobbyists that were building their own computers, and there'd be a blank for your radio call sign. And that's, Bill Gates was, fighting people over using his basic source code as, he was a big copyright guy back then. So it's always, but ARRL goes back to, let me see here. This is the Amateur Radio Relay League handbook for this year. It's a big monstrosity, thick phone book-like thing, and it covers kit designs, receivers, transmitters, transceivers, VHF, UHF satellites, shortwave, any damn thing you'd ever want to build, with photos and just more detail than you can imagine. So practically, what we can do is either so they shut the phones off, they turned off the internet, cell phones don't work. So now what do you do? Okay, so you can get on, you could have commercial gear that you buy at the store, and you're going to be paying, for VHF gear, you're going to pay maybe $100 or a couple $100. A mobile rig that runs 100 watts, dual band, 2 meters and 440. I'll get into that later. You'll be paying a few $100. There's a thing called D-Star, which includes internet service on microwave, as well as digital modes on 440. I'm going to get into 440 later because it's under attack by the Department of Homeland Security recently. So I'm jumping to, in public service workers like firemen and police in Wisconsin, or teachers, I guess, are the main target, or the ones that are protesting the union, the thing where they restricts their collective bargaining, I guess it is. So they could go on strike, the money could be worthless, so there's no one to pay. They're probably not going to do a month's pay for a day's wage if the money becomes hyperinflated. There's all sorts of reasons why, depending on the government, even just aside from the moral quandary, is not really a sustainable thing, because there's a million things that can interrupt it. But there's 700,000 ham operators around. We're just nuts for the hobby. We have our equipment, we run it, we volunteer, we go to hospitals and set up stations for them. We go deploy on, if there's a fire, we set up communication networks. and that's our thing. And so to take our band away and the 440, which is pretty popular for this kind of thing. Yeah. Hello, story. And give it to the first responders, quote unquote, who might be on strike, might not be available for any number of reasons, and they really don't want to take our bands away because they like having us supplement their budget because we don't cost anything. We're a free asset, so why would they screw us? So this is a Republican doing this, Peter King of New York, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, trying to take away our 440 megahertz band, which has become a very popular band for a lot of the public service work that we do. Okay, so anyway, I was getting back to the gear you could buy cheap. Well, commercially, you're spending a few $100 on VHF gear, UHF gear, and then if you go into shortwave, see, if the VHF gear only works locally. It's going to work line of sight plus a third. If you have repeaters, it'll repeat. You hit the mountaintop, and anything the mountaintop sees, you'll talk to. Sometimes those mountaintop repeaters are linked, so it's kind of like the lighting of the torches on top of the mountains in, I think it was Return of the King. You know, you have repeaters that are linked, and they kind of create a long channel backbone where anyone who could talk anywhere on any of those machines can talk to someone else. And then we have internet gateways. Now, of course, I just said the internet's had the plug pulled, so you can't really rely on that. But like the WIN system, you can talk to Alaska and Texas and UK, and D-Star has a similar thing where they actually have internet. You could actually use it for internet, just using ham radio frequencies. So that might be a way to escape the shutdown, because they shut it down in the U.S. doesn't mean you can't link to a site in Mexico or something, or Canada. And I have a photo to that effect here. Hold on a moment. Okay. Signaling descent. So this is actually an interesting article in The Economist. You can go online and find that out. Economist.com and then whatever. Directional antennas. You know, I hadn't thought of that when I was writing my other article. Is a way to avoid having your conversations eavesdropped, and a way to connect with distant stations. However, you're still with VHF or UHF. You're limited to the line of sight plus a third thing. Now, with shortwave, here's a spectacular example. Okay, this is a kind of New York NYC resistor. So they're taking the resistor and making it a political thing. And they have a circuit in an Altoids tin here, and I'll read what it said. After building it and tweaking it to get it on exactly the right frequency, I hooked it up to the dipole on the roof of NYC resistor, which is just a wire antenna, might be the length of the roof, and flipped on the power switch. My 100 milliwatt signal, which is like a kid's walkie-talkie, remember those old things that used to run channel 14? That's what the power it's running. It's running a 9-volt battery. Okay. My 100 milliwatt signal went up into the sky, bounced around between the ionosphere and the ocean a bit, and was picked up by a radio operator in Belgium. He runs what is known as a grabber. It's a computer monitor. It just monitors these kind of things. And so his signal was faithfully reproduced on a screen. And you're really not going to be able to see that, but there's a, you kind of can. Anyway, his signal was sent from New York with a kid's walkie-talkie power 9-volt battery through this thing that was built into an Altoids tin and received in Belgium. So shortwave can do that kind of thing for you. There's limitations doing it that way. You get he's doing real slow Morse code. So I'm going to start demonstrating some things. For instance, I have myself an Altoids tin transceiver. Now this is, before I get to that, I get the kind of monitor lagging here. Okay. Let's see here, hold on. Okay, that is my, what I call a blackout bag, just hanging there. It has all sorts of ways of making a fire, ways of just extra supplies, first aid kits, all sorts of things. And I have another thing called a bug out bag, which, let's see, can we see it here? Yeah, he's wearing glasses, got a coat. And down here, there's a bag with supplies and things. And I have, you know, just if something were to happen, the power goes out, or the, you know, they had floods and they were evacuating people, or God knows what. These are the things you grab and you go out the door, even if you can't get to your car, and you got stuff to sustain you for a few days, and to go and deal with the wilderness. If you're going to be out there longer than 3 days, you can start looking for edible wild plants and cook things and purify water, stuff like that. So I got lots of that. So in this this blackout bag, I'm going to just get it. Hold on. Alrighty. Hope this is. I see call signs. Bug out bag. Yeah. I'm a survivalist. Whatever can I say? Survival podcast. Jack Spirko, right on. Okay, this is a tiny little Alinco 1/2 watt VHF transceiver, and I bet I could hear the toilet channel if I.
5. You're 5 and 8. You're 5 and 7. 5 and.
Okay, that's local repeater. Here's another local repeater.
Yeah, I saw. I was looking on the Mount Wilson tower cam.
Okay, fine. There's a thing in here I call the toilet channel, because they have colorful operators. Here we go.
Serving 5 foods that cause leakage.
Okay, talking about unsavory topics. So anyway, I have it set on the international calling frequency of 146.52. Now, unless you're in Culver City, you're not going to hear that. I'm visiting here. That's where I'm doing the broadcast today. I'm now going to take, through the miracle of a netbook that's portable, I'm going to walk over to this other setup I have. Okay, what that is a Radio Shack scanner, nothing extraordinary about it. I have it set on the studio transmitter link of an AM broadcaster. So even though it only receives VHF and UHF, you can still receive AM broadcasts on it, because you just listen to their studio transmitter link. It's up around 450 megahertz, which is where these family radio system things are. So you may have seen these other radios. They have a couple mile range, but then again, that's a couple mile range, and you know, you might need longer than that. So here you can hear that in the background. Let's turn that up. Now I'm going to key this up. This is WA6 Zulu Fox Yankee testing. Okay, so that was an intercom type system, because I have it set on a priority channel, so that whenever the signal comes in on the priority channel, which happens to be 5.2, I hear it, and so I could be listening to the news and still get my alerts using just a plain old generic Radio Shack type scanner. So, and you can do that with these family radio service things too, because they broadcast up in 450. If you know the frequency, you can find those. Another thing I have, I'm just going through these options besides ham radio for just a moment here, is, yeah, I'm the prop comic today. Arg. Oh, here we go. This I keep in the car. A lot of the stuff I keep in the car. This is a, I'll hold it up. Messy room here. Okay, so this is an emergency CB radio. And I can either use a magnet mount on the roof of the car, or I can just put in a telescoping antenna, which is what I'm going to do. So hang on. And it plugs into 12 volts. And we're going to talk about 12 volts now. Now I have this switching power supply, and you see next to it is a 12 volt plug. This would be the thing you stick in the car to get you your 12 volts. But wait, there's more. You might be out, there might be no fuel for your car, you might be out in the woods. So what are you going to do then, smart guy? Well, I've got my solar bag, and what it does is provide 4 watts of charging to a battery pack, which you can't read. Oh, I guess you can read that. That's amazing. One second. I'll open this up. And in the battery pack, there are 10 AA rechargeable cells. So I will never run out of juice out in the field, because 4 watts is plenty for these little radio applications and recharging cell phones and stuff. But the cell phones are down in this scenario, so I realize that. Okay, and it has a cigarette adapter next to the battery pack, so I'm getting power to this thing. And I'm going to play with this CB for just a moment. I was getting this some time. And so I'm turning that on. What am I missing here? Okay. Put it channel 1. And so you can see it lit up on channel 1, which happens to be 26.965 megahertz. And I have another piece of kit here. That is on. Oop. Screensaver. Well, I guess you'll have to trust me that it says 26965. I guess you can see that. All right, so I'm going to turn the volume up on that and key this down using the solar power. So you can use a solar bag to send out a CB signal, and I also have a 50-watt 2-meter transceiver. I'm running around. I feel like one of those infomercial. But wait, there's more. It chops, it slices, it dices. Oh, I should turn the power on.
I'll just wait. So you fix that CD, N7.
So.
And I will catch you back.
This provides touch-tone access.
In about a mile. So you fix that CD, N7 KD.
So this will provide the 50 watts. This will get out anywhere around a local area, much more so than CB. And if you have, there's usually a whole bunch of repeaters. For example, that half a watt radio is waving around. I use that driving through Kansas, going to the Heinlein Centennial, and I was talking to the engineer in charge of public broadcasting in Kansas for the whole west part of the state, where I had no cell signal whatsoever on my Sprint phone. And Sprint moved their data center to Kansas back when I used to work for them back in the 80s. So they had no signal in Kansas, where they supposedly moved to when they were bought out. But my stupid ham radio, it was working just great all throughout the state. And then, of course, when I got into Kansas City, in Missouri, the cells started working again. But so of course there are plenty more repeaters too. So out in the middle of nowhere, the ham option is great, including the shortwave stuff. Okay, I'm going to finally show you, because the time is advancing here, and I'll look at your chats here and see if anything's happening. Packet radio is an emergency texting. I'm getting to packet radio. I'm getting to texting. I'm going to get to texting. I'm going to get to things you can do that don't require knowing Morse code or anything like that. Yeah, there is packet. I used to set up TCP using a handheld, not much different than that. It had like 2 watts instead of half a watt, but I could connect it in when I lived in Culver City full time, because officially I live in Pahrump, so I'm not the taxpayer they're looking for in California. But when I really lived here all the time, I would connect up to LAX, and I could upload and download programs and images and all sorts of things. All right, so I've still got my same old solar bag with the rechargeables, and here's where I keep my 2 shortwave radios, transceivers no less, that I built myself, darn it, using my own soldering skills and stuff. So here's a soldering iron. And it's cooking away. One thing about a soldering iron, I'm not actually going to. There's 2 types of. There's a couple different types of solder. I think there's acid core, which is more for welding. I could be wrong about that. I don't know nothing about welding. But here's something called lead-free solder. Now I use that to hook up the connectors to this thing. Which is a tuna can radio. And so I have that device that was listening to 26965 to listen to CB. Well, I am now going to change it to 7030. Actually, I'm going to change it to 7029. It's a little under that. I'm going to turn this thing on. And so what it does is so it transmits Morse code. It also receives it because that oscillator that's always going acts as a beat frequency for the direct conversion receiver. So it's a pretty simple circuit. And that circuit would fit inside of a plasticky toy-looking thing like this, as it turns out. And it would also, the 9-volt battery it uses would fit in there. And I also think I could fit a PIC microcontroller in there. And I could probably have a flip-up keyboard come up. This is something I'm working on. Okay, so this is a BlackBerry keyboard, actually, and it's a little small, I think. I don't like that thing. Okay, let me turn this off. Another radio I have is the tuna tin. You know, we don't want to offend vegetarians, right? So the current thing now is to do Altoids tins. I don't know if that's a reason, but these things are everywhere. You know, you can't avoid them. So I hooked up the... they're indestructible, too. I dropped that damn tuna tin a million times, and it still works, and this thing will still work, too. It does not have an internal battery. This one has another amplifier stage, so instead of running a kid's walkie-talkie power, which would be like 100 milliwatts or so, 200 milliwatts, this would run a full watt. It does run a full watt. And I can hear the signal coming from the tuna tin on this, and this thing can hear the signal coming out of here. So this is a nice little transceiver set that works on the international now, because it used to be, okay, it's called the 40-meter QRP CW channel. 7030 used to be international, 7040 used to be United States. Now we're all one happy world, and these work on the Unified Global 7030 standard. And so there's my Altoids project. Now it's not really the most practical thing. The thing I'm working on that's I'm gonna depend on more. Okay, this is a Dremel. It's a knockoff of a Dremel. This is to drill. I drill holes in the tuna tin, and the Altoids can. You can see holes that I've drilled. I usually use just. I used to use a small drill size, and just poke in and create a puncture, and then get a bigger one, and then get a bigger one from that. But it was never still big enough, even the biggest drill size. So what I do now is I take this one size, and it's able to puncture through, and then I just sort of widen the circle, grinding around this thin amount of tin to get the hole I need. So if I need to put in a connector like an on-off switch or something, it goes through one of the holes that fits, and then you can put a screw, a nut on, and it makes a nice looking connection when it's down here. I'll just show you. Just save time. Obviously, we're kind of don't have unlimited time. So there's the thing for the push button that does the Morse code sending. So when I do that, that's that. Here are, you can see a BNC connector for the antenna, and I can put a let's see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I can put a BNC adapter, and then that lets me plug in regular sized coax connection to a real antenna. So you can't really, you pretty much have anything. So I have an audio jack for earbuds, and a 12-volt input from the various, like the Solar Bag works great. This thing is an amazing product for off-grid usage. I've used it to start cars. This guy was stranded at the gas station, so it's a Wagon Power Dome EX. Spirko talks about it on the show, but you can see I got the clipper for the leads there. I have fluorescent light. That's what this is. Yeah. So fluorescent light plugs into it. I have a 12-volt fan that'll plug into it. Have also any of these. The 50-watt radio will work on it just fine. So that's being powered out of this Power Dome EX. And it has a built-in radio. It has power inverters, so you can plug in 110 appliances and all sorts of things. So that might be the thing you have in your car. Oh, and it has an air compressor to pump up your tires. I didn't need to know Morse to get my call sign. No, you don't. You don't need Morse code to get a license. That's correct. Oh, okay. So why even mess around with Morse code? Well, you don't have to, except as treating it as a data encoding method. So here's why. Novice and technician class licenses, because the novice is the old one, technician is the thing you can get today, have shortwave privileges of Morse code only on various useful shortwave bands, including those international frequency, the 7030 thing I think is novice legal. So novices and technicians, so technician, I should call it technician, the lowest license class that would be the easiest test with questions and answers would be able to use that. Not that you'd want to use that particular frequency anyway. You'd probably want to set up a network on common frequencies have some kind of prep net or anarchy net or whatever. And yeah, I'll get into that in a minute. Okay, here, I'll read from my article. Let's say, just one point of clarification, because this will answer people who don't care about regulations, and I don't care too much about it. During a political upheaval, checking the call sign of amateur radio operators won't be the state's top priority, and effectively jamming all signals might not be possible. That's an understatement, especially if one were to use spread spectrum techniques. And even back in this 1994, 1995 article, I'm talking about spread spectrum. In fact, that's been an obsession of mine since the 80s when I first knew about it. And it was in the Ham call book back then, but you could find out more for military things. So here's what we got. Let's say you were to transmit thermal noise in one band, and that noise mixed with the message in another. That's called transmitted reference. It would appear to be noise as well. So you have the signal that sounds like noise, but it's a perfectly good signal when you de-spread out the noise. And if there's for programming, there's a thing called direct sequence. You have several pseudo-random chip bits with each bit of your message. And you also have a thing called frequency hopping. You can hop the center frequency using a fast digital synthesis chip and a secure software spreading code. And I might as well read the last paragraph too. It has nothing to do with that. So spread spectrum is a technical thing that's way beyond the depth of this talk. And but if you don't care about legalities and any of that stuff, that's the thing you want to learn. And just to be safe, you might use a stealthy hidden antenna that looks like a clothesline, basketball hoop, bird feeder, flagpole, or other disguise so your neighbors don't rat you out. Out of sight, out of mind. Okay, so I'm going to get back to Morse code. How can you use Morse code and not know Morse code? That's absurd, isn't it? Well, not so fast. We have here a iPod Touch. So the phones are dead, the internet's dead, but I can recharge my iPod. And one of the apps that I have, well, first of all, I have one for Packet, using audio decoding, and I have one for radio teletype. I actually get that one to work. But most successful of all of these things is my Morse code detector. It will read Morse code and interpret it. So if it hears it on the air, it will uncode it. So let me prove that. I have and to send it, you might want to use some sort of microcontroller. For example, in this case, I have a basic stamp setup. I think mostly we want to use an Arduino setup. Basically, what I'm trying to do, what I'm developing, is a single product. It would be open source, of course, and I'm calling it the Enmorser. And so this is, for instance, a keyboard that comes with a P-Touch. And it actually runs off 9 volts. It has like 6 AA batteries, but a 9-volt battery works great just for the LCD and the keyboard recognition. So something like that would work for the application I want to hijack it for. And so I'm going to turn this one on. Okay, so here's, you have a push button here on this little breadboard, which lights up a LED. Okay, now the computer is actually sending this code. And what it's not doing is showing you the magnificent sending of the red and green things in time, but you get just trust me that it's doing it at that 24 word a minute clip. And you'll find Arduino, if you look at resilientfreedom.org, I have an article called 300 word per minute Arduino or something like that. And this guy has this open source system that is sending and receiving Morse code audio, decoding it at the same time with two different systems, and it's working at 300 words per minute, and so it's full duplexing, so that's pretty amazing. So I don't know if that would be practical on the air, but even the thing that worked from New York to Belgium with the kids' walkie-talkie power is using Morse code, except real slow. So here's the bottom line: you can have a computer send it, and you can have a computer interpret it. Oh, I was going to prove that I can do the interpreting. So it was actually trying to do that right here. So I'm putting the audio input for my iPod. Set this again. Okay. Next to, so here we go. Oh, I gotta set it to. All right. Hold on a moment. Yeah. So it's sending CQ, 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 DE, WA6ZFY, my call sign, a few times, and then K, which is an invitation to transmit. So this thing sent it, and my iPod received it, and I wouldn't necessarily have to know any of that Morse code stuff to use it. So a system could be set up. I have source code for Morse code interpreting that's available to draw from. I'm kind of writing my own stuff at the moment, and so that's my digital mode of choice because it seems to work very well, and the regulations on it are the most liberal. If you use Packet, well, okay, if you're on VHF, you can do what I did back in the 90s and use Packet to connect, across town. Like I could connect to the airport, and then you'd be in the Packet network, and they'd be switching stuff around. And sometimes they would use shortwave gateways. So those higher privileged classes could use the shortwave gateways, even though you, as your low-class technician, could just get your message onto the bulletin board. So that's one way of avoiding being hassled by the man, by having your papers in order. So, data encryption is legal on the ham bands, just not for hiding information, so you still have to be an outlaw. Okay, so I think I went through a lot of stuff, and now I'm actually going to look at the chat messages and have you see what the hell I missed. Pirate stations. Okay, that was my survival kit. All right, let's see. We'll go way back. Yeah. Oh, I see. You're listing the stuff that's in your bug out bag. 24 word a minute Morse. That makes me want to cry. Well, yeah. Is that too slow? Too fast? I don't know. But you can do things faster. Now the people that connect from New York to Hummingbird antenna. Yeah. Right. No, these things are out there. Yeah. Stealthy antennas. That's good. Okay, hold on. What is that app called? Okay. Morse code. I think it costs $10, but get it while your money has purchasing power. I think it's called Hot Paw Morse Code Decoder. If you look for Morse Code Decoder, you're bound to find that, something like that. And I have no idea what the Android market is like. And this brings me. I'm missing over a lot of things, but maybe what we need to do instead of reinventing the universe is just be able to write apps and not have to worry about the App Store somehow. So we need to be able to get apps onto our devices without the App Store maybe that's more trouble than it's worth, because then the next upgrade they can lock us out. I see the lag we have here. Okay. Oh, I'm over my 45. So let's see what we. Oh, yeah. Like I said, there's 700,000 amateur radio licensees, and it's cheap to get your license. There's lots of clubs. Oh, thank you. 5 more minutes till 55. Okay, thank you. There are clubs that are just like, you're going to go there and they're going to be retired Navy or something, and law enforcement maybe, or just your local people that are techies or into electronics. And that's going to be useful as far as building stuff. They're not going to be your fire-breathing libertarians. Now, in Pahrump, Nevada, though, they tend to be fire-breathing anarchists. Well, they're not anarchists, let's say. So they're Ron Paul types, which is still pretty good. I mean, you don't expect that. Hell, even our sheriff, who was in the movie that Neil filmed there, is on YouTube, threatening to arrest the feds that venture onto Nye County. So that's just awesome beyond words. So Pahrump, there's one club I was going to. It met once a month, but my schedule was such that I would always miss the meetings. I mean, I think I made 2 meetings. But they also have a meeting Friday morning every week at the Pahrump Diner or something like that. Anyway, I know where it is. I just go there. It's like 8 a.m. But that they have a pretty good attendance. Totally separate from the membership of the other club, which also had a pretty number of attendance. And for a small town like Pahrump, that's a lot of ham operators. You have Art Bell has a big antenna farm. You go around, there's all these people, because it's a rural, semi-rural type thing over the hump, over this big mountain, 5,000-foot mountain from Las Vegas. So we'll survive the nukes when Vegas gets it. And okay, I got a couple minutes here. And so yeah, a local club. Look for a local club. QRZ.com, ARRL.com. So, for example, ARRL.org. I'm wrong. So it's what was the other one I mentioned? Anyway, there's QRP clubs for doing these little Altoid kits. Oh, Make Magazine. Okay, trendy young people that are into computers and that are probably more, at least maybe liberal leaning, but rebels, would be the Make Magazine crowd, like Boing Boing. Mark Frauenfelder is associated with Make Magazine, and they're all into building this stuff. So, they'd be into these, they're going to be into the Arduino kits, which are open source things. And they lied. Make Magazine lied. Okay, I'm going to show where they lied. They said there was no basic stamp USB thing, and there it is. I bought one, so I know it works. So I just plug in the computer to the USB thing, put my programs in. They stay in there. Every time I turn it on, it runs it. And I'm sure there's something, the Arduino thing is probably the more practical way to go. The reason I didn't get it is it wasn't on the shelf. I go to Orvac in Fullerton, not on the shelf. I go to Fry's, not on the shelf, but they do have a basic stamp. Orvac didn't have any microcontrollers. They have some other neat kits like this sound-activated tape recorder thing, but not the Arduino, no microcontroller projects whatsoever. So Fry's had the basic stamp. I wanted it then and there, and I grabbed it. So I'm learning some basics of how to deal with the microcontroller. And so eventually I'll be putting together a product. Or maybe, okay, so here's a question that maybe, what do you prefer? Supporting, well, I guess it'd be nice to have a contest, offer a prize. We have a keyboard, more sender and receiver that anybody can use. And, the best one wins, and they get the grand or something like that. So maybe that's something I'll do with the Resilient Freedom. got some money coming for that. And okay, well, I guess this is about time. So, well, thank you. I hope you got something out of that. And if you go to Resilient Freedom or permakent.com, you can see links that I mentioned in ham radio over the years and other things, survivalist things and permaculture. Alrighty, goodbye.